Biography of Christopher Latham Sholes, inventor of the QWERTY keyboard 1868. Christopher Latham Sholes, February 14, 1819 to February 17, 1890, was an American inventor who invented the QWERTY keyboard, and along with Samuel W. Soule, Carlos Glidden, and John Pratt, is considered one of the inventors of the QWERTY keyboard. Inventor of the first typewriter in America. He was also a newspaper publisher and Wisconsin politician. In his time, Sholes used the name C. Latham Sholes, Latham Sholes, or C. L. Sholes, but never the names Christopher Sholes or Christopher L. Sholes. Youth career and politics. Born in Mooresburg, in Montour County, Pennsylvania, Sholes moved to nearby Danville and worked there as an apprentice to a printer. After completing his apprenticeship, Sholes moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in 1837, and then to Southport, Wisconsin, now Kenosha. On February 4, 1841, in Green Bay, he married Mary Jane McKinney of that city. He became a newspaper publisher and politician, serving in the Wisconsin State Senate from 1848 to 1849 as a Democrat, in the Wisconsin State Assembly from 1852 to 1853 as a Free Soiler, and again in the Senate as a Republican from 1856 to 1857. He was instrumental in the success of the movement to abolish the death penalty in Wisconsin. His newspaper, the Kenosha Telegraph, reported on the trial of John McCaffrey in 1851, and later in 1853 he led the campaign in the Wisconsin State Assembly. Also noteworthy was Sholes' role in the massive railroad corruption scheme that engulfed the legislature in 1856. Sholes is one of the few legislators who actually rejects bribery. He was the younger brother of Charles Sholes (1816 to 1867), who was also a newspaper publisher and politician who served in both houses of the Wisconsin State Legislature and as mayor of Kenosha. Bore notes. In 1845, Sholes worked as editor of the Southport Telegraph, a small newspaper in Kenosha. During this time, he heard about the alleged discovery of the Vorey record, a set of 3 very small brass plates unearthed by James J. Strang, the future successor to Joseph Smith, founder of the Latter-day Saint movement. Strange asserted that this proved he was a prophet of God the True Ones, and he invited the public to visit him and see the plates for themselves. Sholes later visited Strang, examined his Vorey record, and wrote an article about their meeting. He pointed out that although he could not accept Strang's plates or his prophetic claims, Strang himself appeared to be honest and earnest, and his students were among the most honest and intelligent men in the neighborhood. Regarding the record itself, Sholes stated that he was satisfied with not having an opinion about it. Found a typewriter. Typewriters with multiple keyboards were invented as early as 1714 by Henry Mill and were reinvented in various forms throughout the 1800s. It is believed that Sholes drew inspiration from the discoveries of others, including those of Frank Haven Hall, Samuel W. Soule, Carlos Glidden, Giuseppe Ravizza and, especially, John Pratt, who was mentioned in an 1867 Scientific American article. Glidden is known to have shown Sholes. Sholes' typewriter improved the simplicity and efficiency of previous models, resulting in its patent and commercial success. Sholes moved to Milwaukee and became a newspaper editor. After a strike by the composer on his printing press, he tried to build a machine for typesetting, but it failed and he soon abandoned the idea. He arrived at the typewriter via a different route. The original goal was to create a machine to number the pages of books, tickets, and so on. He began work on this in a machine shop in Milwaukee, along with fellow printer Samuel W. Soule. They patented a numbering machine on November 13, 1866. Sholes and Soule showed their machine to Carlos Glidden, a lawyer, an amateur inventor in a machine shop who was working on a mechanical plow. Glidden wondered if the machine couldn't be made to produce letters and words as well. Further inspiration came in July 1867, when Sholes came across a short note in Scientific American describing the typewriter, a typewriter prototype invented by John Pratt. From this description, Sholes decided that the type was too complicated and set about building his own machine, whose name he got from the article, typewriter, or typewriter. For this project, Soule was again enlisted and Glidden joined them as a third partner to provide funding. The Scientific American article without illustrations figuratively uses the phrase literary piano. The first model made by the trio had a keyboard that literally resembled a piano. The keys are black and the keys are white, arranged in 2 rows. Does not contain key numbers 0 or 1 because the letters O and I are considered sufficient. The first row is made of ivory and the second row is made of ebony, the rest of the frame is made of wood. Despite the apparent evidence of Pratt's earlier work, it was in this same form that Sholes, Glidden, and Soule were granted patents for their inventions on June 23, 1868 and July 14, respectively. The first document created on a typewriter was a contract Sholes wrote, in his capacity as controller for the city of Milwaukee. Machines similar to Sholes had previously been used by blind men for embossing, but in Sholes' time the inked ribbon had been invented, which made typing possible in its present form. At this stage, the Sholes-Glidden-Soule typewriter was just one among dozens of similar inventions. They wrote hundreds of letters on their machine to various people, one of whom was James Densmore of Meadville, Pennsylvania. Densmore believed that a typewriter would be very profitable, and offered to buy part of the patent, without even having seen the machine. The 3 immediately sold a quarter of the patent in exchange for paying all their expenses so far. When Densmore finally inspected the machine in March 1867, he declared it useless in its present form, and urged them to begin repairing it. Out of desperation, Soule and Glidden abandoned the project, leaving Sholes and Densmore as the sole owners of the patent. Realizing that stenographers would be the first and most important users of the machine, and therefore best able to judge its suitability, they sent experimental versions to several stenographers. Most important among them was James O. Clephane of Washington, D.C., who tried the instruments as no one else had, conducting endless tests until he destroying them, one by one, as fast as they could be made and shipped. For him, his assessment was equally scathing, causing Sholes to lose patience. But Densmore insists that this is what they need. Sholes followed this advice and began improving the machine with each iteration, until they were satisfied that Clephane had taught them all he could. Currently, they have produced about 50 machines, at an average cost of $250, equivalent to almost $5,000 in 2020. They decided to have the machine inspected by an expert mechanic, who directed them to E. Remington and Sons, which later became the Remington Arms Company, a manufacturer of firearms, sewing machines, and farm equipment. In early 1873, they approached Remington, who decided to purchase the patent from them. Sholes sold his half for $12,000, while Densmore, still a firm believer in the machine, demanded royalties, which would ultimately earn him $1.5 million. Sholes returned to Milwaukee and continued to work on new improvements to the typewriter throughout the 1870s, including the QWERTY keyboard 1873. James Densmore has suggested a commonly used letter combination split to solve jamming problems caused by slow recovery methods from key presses, weights, not springs, return all the parts to their rest position. This concept was later refined by Sholes, and the resulting QWERTY layout is still used today on both typewriters and English-language computer keyboards, although the jamming problem no longer exists. Sholes died on February 17, 1890, after battling tuberculosis for 9 years. He is buried at Forest Home Cemetery in Milwaukee.